What's up, Tiger fans? Anthony Romo here with another edition of our Springfield Tigers Coaches Corners here on YSN. Proud to be joined with the head ball coach, Sean Guerriero. Coach, a big win last week. Thanks for joining me.
Oh, not a problem. Always glad to be a part of YSN.
So let's start off with last week's matchup against Matthews. You guys used week 10 of the season to be able to sneak in to get a home game in week 1 of the playoffs, and I think you guys used that home game to the most of your advantage. A 42-0 victory, a great team win. You guys jumped out early, 21 points in the first quarter, so 21-0 lead after the first. Was that a point of emphasis pregame to kind of jump out early and get the home crowd into it?
I just think for our kids, it was great to have a fast start and make sure our kids had everything ready to roll. When we were come out to to play. It was a good start for our kids to be able to hop on them and just to be so efficient in what we were doing offensively, defensively, and on special teams.
And a couple guys stuck out for me offensively. First, Colton Rourke, the quarterback, 6 for 6 for 3 touchdowns. Doesn't get much more efficient than that. We were kind of talking about before we went live. That's a pretty efficient way, but also on the ground game. You guys used a lot of guys on the ground last week, and someone that stuck out to me was Ryan Carcelli, 17 carries for 122 yards and 2 touchdowns. Just talk a little bit about what Carcelli means to this offense.
Well, with C, right, you mean with him developing as the year went on. I think Ryan has done a good job just on just being a little bit more patient, making sure that we're hitting the hole right. And we always talk with our backs, and that's one thing. Sometimes as kids get caught up in trying to score touchdowns, and that's something where I talked about him developing is. Okay, let's just. We always talk about having a goal to get 4 yards. Okay, if we're going to get 4 yards, and normally having that patience and seeing that next, he can bounce one and take one for, 15, 20 yards, and I just feel like he's getting a better feel. For hitting the hole, having some patience, waiting for our linemen and waiting for those blocks to develop, and I think too that comes with our offensive line. If you would talk to him, that's probably the first person or the first people he would end up thanking is our offensive line. And over the past 11 weeks, boy, have they developed. Into their own. Just making sure that our offense is going to go through our run game. So I was so happy to see. Ryan ended up actually got I think 1,000 yards last week for us, which was great. I also think with him and then Dante Gentile, who's getting some carries, who plays a lot of defense. But for him, I think he averaged 10 yards a carry last week. So
11.
I think between those two, it's our ground game has developed, and those guys up front are getting a little nasty up there and doing their job.
Yeah, you talk about that offensive line. They did a phenomenal job last week. You guys ran for over 200 yards as a team, and I find that interesting that you find it a goal to gain at least 4 yards per rush. Well, you guys averaged 8 yards per carry last week as a team, which I think was huge in that category. And I think that when you get the rushing attack going, that's a real momentum boost for any team.
Oh, it's for sure. If we can line up, and like I said, our goal is 4, but if we can get more than that, that's a bonus. And then with that, we could hopefully control the clock a little bit, be able to kind of maintain the game, and then it sets up your pass game for us a little bit. More people are going to try to add people into the box, and if they get a 6 or 7 in the box, we have to be able to run the football.
And on the other side of the ball, defensively, you talk about the big boys up front. I think the line did a great job last week, kind of closing holes before they could even begin for the Matthews rushing attack. They couldn't get many big plays at all to kind of build momentum their way. So I'm sure you had to be happy with your team's defensive performance last week.
Well, I was happy for mostly one player that we had. Austin first tore his ACL, and this was his first week back. And I think all those guys up front wanted to see him run around and play football. I was so happy for him to be able to get back, play in front of the home crowd, in front of the community. You kind of talked about that, but for us to get a home game was awesome. Our crowd was lights out. We had a ton of people there. It's just that atmosphere, and to be able to have our kids play one more home game was a bonus for our seniors and for our team. So I think that was a bonus. But for Austin to be able to come back and being out 5 weeks and to see how hard he's worked in just rehabbing that knee and just trying to get, a few more snaps for him. But he was flying around and he did a great job for us. So I think that was a bonus. And then you talk about, Tyler Young and Trevor Kowecki, who have been really working hard and just being able to make plays. But defensively, our guys are, those big guys are eating up double teams. Our linebackers are be able to run and make plays. So collectively, I just think our defense overall is just running to the football better for us, understanding their role. And over the past couple of weeks, I would say as a whole, just our practice it has been good on both sides of the football. You just see a little bit more energy. It's time. I think at this point too, hopefully this is some of the experience that we've had the past couple of years is picking up, where keep talking about just gearing it up a little bit more, and those guys are doing that. And with that, I couldn't. We talk about with our team and having roles, but our scout team does a phenomenal job of just getting after it. During the week and giving us a great look. And now that the season's over or the regular season's over, where those guys don't have freshman games or JV games, those guys are doing it on their own. Whether we're running through the stunts or running through the offensive plays a little bit before, maybe why our older guys are lifting. But I couldn't be happier on those young guys' performance and how they prepare our older kids.
And we talked a little bit about this last week, how you guys have been very fortunate the last few years to make it very far into the playoffs and get some extra weeks of practice in. And now these guys that are now the starters for this varsity team, at one time they were in that scout team role, preparing for some of these tough teams that you guys have played in the playoffs in the past. Do you think that having that scout team role when they were younger has really helped them out to be able to understand how some of these other offenses and defenses kind of present themselves?
I really do think that's a key. And for most of these kids, at least on their defensive side, those kids have faced Bill Brungard for the past 3 years, or 2 years.
That helps prepare you.
Yeah, who could put you in a better situation. So against them in the line, and it's just I think the extra weeks of practices have benefited. And we knew we were going to have a rough start, at the beginning of the season, and we talked about that. But I think our kids have developed over the season. And just making sure that they're doing the right thing and they're trying to carry on the tradition of it. But too, I think some of these guys are trying to make their own names, and I think they want to be, the guys that we're talking about saying, hey, does this person help you in the playoff run or through the season doing it? So I think our guys are kind of playing with the chip on their shoulder just because of the success that we've had, and I think they've done a good job. Like I said, our practices have been clean. Our practices have been hard. Those guys, we really don't, take down and tackle too much, but you could definitely see that there is a little bit of an edge, and the kids are popping each other a little bit and getting to the ball. So it's been fun to watch and fun to be a part of how this team has grown and developed and has gained that experience throughout the season.
And I really like what you said about guys kind of building their own identity, because we talked about this last week, how the last few years, Springfield has graduated a lot of guys that will go down as some of the best players in school history. I'd say as a whole, you guys, your teams the last few years were very upperclassmen heavy. And since they've moved on, these guys now are not only looking to keep the tradition going, but it's a lot of new faces. Like we talked about last week, a lot of guys that are stepping up in big roles for a team that really wants to continue what the teams of the past have done. Who are some of those guys you think this year have really taken that next step from week one to now?
Oh gosh, I don't know if I could pinpoint one.
You might be naming the whole team, I think.
Our team as a whole has gotten better from week one. When you talk about, how they developed from, in even the kids, whether it's the injury of Austin first made a couple guys step forward. To me, it's when you say about getting those opportunities as a young player, it's those guys stepping up and making the plays. And when your number's called, you have to make the play. I don't even know if it's a choice right now for those guys, but I just feel like, as a group or as a whole between our secondary, and I really still haven't talked about. We talked about Austin first getting injured, but we lost, one of our starting running backs, an outside linebacker. We almost had to redevelop our kicking game Because Kason Kosick was injured week 3, and he's still out. He broke his leg, but for him, I think overall, I could sit here and name, 10, 15 kids that have stepped up and I thought have done a great job in developing this. Going in weeks 4, 5, and 6, we couldn't kick an extra point. And now, every time we go up, and it seems like it's clockwork, and knock on wood on that, but I just want to make sure that, when you get to this point of the season, it's going to be all the little things now, whether that's not keeping contain on something, to turning the ball over, to giving a team a short field. We really try to focus on those type of things. And even in the games, that we ended up losing, we still end up talking about, you get a game like that it might literally be 5 plays that make the difference in a game. And that could be from a 7-point win or loss to a 28-point win or loss. So it's going to be about winning those battles. And special teams, I think, is going to be big in this game. They have a good kicking game, and it's going to be of the yardage that's lost or gained throughout that. So I think now that our team has developed into that. We were given weeks 4, 5, and 6 our opponent the ball on the 35, 40-yard line. That's a short field. If we can keep that inside the 25-yard line, that's a goal for us. But it's going to be about those hidden yards, turnovers, and like I said, with special teams, because I think at times people take that for granted. But we always talk about or preach about having great special teams, and punt's the most important play of the game. So those type of things we work really hard on and definitely try to get better at it and develop into a team it's going to take advantage of those things. That's a one-play series. So I just think overall, when you talk about players, it might be our groups. Like you talked about Ryan and Dante doing well at our running backs. I think Colton, and you talked about him a little bit earlier, for him, and we were kind of joking around. We said, our passing attack's been good, but for him at the efficiency of being 6 for 6 and 3 for touchdowns, I think it was an awesome game for him to pick up week 11 and gain a little bit more confidence going into this game, which is huge. I think even our wideout core, from top to bottom has been good between Shondell, Dylan, and Sean, and even Cade, in the Mineral Ridge won a game for us. Those guys have been doing great. Our linemen up front, kind of led by, Trevor Kowecki is a senior for us. Then we got some young kids between Tyler Young, Lucas DeTillo, Connor Sugar, Thomas Shealy, Zach Weikart stepped up for us at a big point last week. Our tight ends have developed. Jake O'Donnell and Mike Lasivita. Jake O'Donnell is kind of developed into a very good tight end for us, and he's doing a lot of positive things. In the backfield, and probably who doesn't get enough when you talk about Ryan, even with Dante, is Vinny Woods. He's kind of been playing fullback and tight end for us, and he's back at fullback. And Ryan would, give that kid a big hug and a kiss for how he kicks out and what he does. But I think overall, just offensively, we've done good. And it's the same thing, defensively for us. I think our linebackers are feeling good about themselves running to the football. We have Dante Gentile, Lucas DeTillo, Wyatt Kuboff, had a big game for us last week. And Josh Velasco's has been a kid who's developed into a good football player who's rotating in that crew. And we kind of talked about those guys up front between Trevor, Tyler, Austin, Jake O'Donnell, Mike Lasivita, Vinny Woods. Those guys up front, they're keeping those guys clean. And our secondary has been good overall because we really haven't given up the big plays. So I think overall, I think I named every kid that's kind of playing for us. But I think overall, those guys as a whole have done a great job and having pride in themselves and having pride in their position group just to lift it up and get after it. So, those guys have done good and have done very well. So I'm happy for our kids right now. I'm happy for those seniors who I have felt have done a great job in leading our football team.
Yeah, and you mentioned Wyatt Kuboff. He actually led the team in tackles last week. He was huge defensively for you guys in that win against Matthews. Well, now looking forward against Warren JFK this week, you guys are going to travel to Liberty. Liberty is where JFK is hosting their 2 home playoff games this season. These are arguably the 2 most dominant teams in the Valley. If you look at it the last few years, Warren JFK, this has kind of been their region the last few years that they've done a really good job. And since you guys have dropped from D6 to D7 this year, this is a really big matchup for this week. Coach, so far, when you look on film of this JFK team, what do you think makes them a dangerous opponent to play against?
Well, I'm going to start with their defense right now. They get after it. You know what I mean? Their guys up front are big. They move well. They eat up gaps. They eat up double teams, which allows their linebackers to run. They are a downhill football team. They are in attack mode, and they do get after it. They blitz and they do a lot of different things. And watching film, I think they do a good job. Obviously, they're well coached in what they do. Their secondary does a good job of kind of taking away three-step and playing, and then next thing you know, they're deep and they're picking off footballs and they're making plays in the secondary. So I think defensively, what makes them dangerous is just I don't think there's a guy on the field that can't run and doesn't have good speed, and that's always hard because obviously for us we want to try to get downhill too, but you got to make sure you got a hat on a hat and our kids are gap sound, and then when they are blitzing and stunting, we got to make sure our heads are up, and we try to end up taking that on. So defensively, I just think their overall speed is I don't think it's like a team that we faced so far. Offensively, they do so many things. It's scary. They can come back and they'll be in the stack eye, then they'll be in a pro or con where they'll have a tight end, two wideouts, and two backs, and the next thing you know, they're going to be in empty or they'll be in four wide. And they do a lot of different things. That's going to be a challenge for our defense to be able to make sure that we get lined up. We have our eyes on our keys, and we try to execute on that side of the football. So they just do so many things well. It's going to be a challenge for our kids, and we've talked to it, and I think they're up for that challenge. And come Friday night, our kids will be buckled up and hopefully ready to roll.
And you guys at Springfield kind of made it look kind of easy these last few years on getting this far into the playoffs. But just talk a little bit about how grueling a season is and how tough it really is to be able to get to week number 12.
Well, it is a grind, especially when you talk about all the things that you try to do, and you're trying to get the kids in the summer to come to workouts. It is a long football season, and I think our kids, and I kind of talked about this going into the playoffs that, and even this has been the first time I really didn't think we were going to have a home game, and our kids were kind of, I don't want to say bummed about it, but I can remember myself, 5 years ago, I would have gone crazy just to make the playoffs. So we kind of talked about just being, grateful for the moment that we're in this situation and we got an opportunity to play another football game. But it's more now, to me, it's more about the experience and making sure the kids are taking care of their bodies. And this weather has been, crazy just because of how warm it's going to be. They said it's almost going to be 70 on Friday. We really haven't had a game in the 70s. So we keep talking to our kids about making sure they're drinking water and making sure they're preparing themselves for Friday, because if it's, 65, 70 degrees, they start sweating. I don't want to have kids start cramping up again and doing those type of things. So I think our kids have learned and bought into our process of making sure whether we gotta ice up, do ice baths, or spend an extra 15 minutes after practice in the training room doing, rehab type of things to make sure our bodies, are at 100% or close to 100% on Friday. Our kids have kind of bought into that over the years, and we don't have to fight the kids anymore, and you're not telling them, they're double checking on them doing it. They are doing the right thing. So I just think about this. It's about being smart and making sure that we have fresh legs and we're doing everything we can to be at 100% by Friday.
All right, Coach. Well, one final thing before we let you go. Looking into Friday night's matchup, what do you think would be some keys to victory for the Springfield Tigers Friday night?
Well, I think for us, offensively, we can't turn the ball over. If we give them extra opportunities, they will take advantage of it. Defensively, if we don't run to the football and tackle well, I think that'll put ourselves in a bad situation, because they have guys all over the place that can make plays. So we just make sure that we have to play team defense, and we got to make sure we hold on to the rock offensively for us to give ourselves, a chance to end up winning this one.
All right, Coach. Well, thanks for joining me here this week. Another edition of our Coaches Corners here for the Springfield Tigers. Coach, we hope to speak to you again next week, and good luck Friday night.
I hope I'll be talking to you next week. Thanks so much.
Yep.